So today, as we're in Daniel chapter 8 and you begin to follow along, it starts this way. It starts with, in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. So what we know right away, time frame is, this is the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign, which means it's 2 years after the vision that we learned about last week. Last week we learned about what was really an incredible vision, and I'm going to touch back on some of those pieces today. But if you want to, you can always go back on YouTube or whatever, and you can watch last week's message if you want to dig in just a little bit deeper. But time frame wise, we know now that this is the 3rd year of this guy's reign. So 2 years after the last chapter, chapter 7. In my vision, I saw myself in the city of Susa, in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai Canal, which is interesting because these places are still there today. Also interesting is where he sees himself is very likely the next kingdom to come, the Medo-Persian kingdom. It's very likely like one of their headquarter areas. So he's seeing himself in this vision at a place where he may have visited. Remember, he was in charge of a lot of different stuff. But he's seeing himself in this area that is going to be almost like a capital city, but later. So he sees himself there beside this river, or what he calls a canal. And as we know, in the Middle East, where there's water, that's an important resource. So where there's water, that's why this city is likely there. So he's right there by that canal. Verse 3 says this, I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns, standing beside the canal. The horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. As we know, as we've read through these visions, we've seen that the Medo-Persian Empire, one side of the bear from last week, if you remember, it talked about the bear, one side was bigger than the other. This is saying now that horn, one horn is bigger than the other. Very, very indicative of the idea that this is pointing to the Medo-Persian Empire. So the Medo-Persian Empire, which is the next empire to come. And if you remember from a couple of weeks ago, because this stuff is kind of out of order chronologically, but a couple of weeks ago we talked about when they took over. When they came in, they went under the wall. If you remember, the writing was on the wall. They wind up coming in under the wall. They killed the king that night. They took over. It was almost as if their battle was really not much of a battle at all. They showed up secretively under the wall. Remember, the wall was like the depth of a football field. Like these are big, big, giant places here. So we've got this king that's going to fall. Daniel is seeing a vision of this next kingdom. So this next kingdom, the Medo-Persian Empire, one horn longer than the other. And it goes on. He says, I watched the ram as it charged towards the west and the north and the south. So he's seeing this kingdom taking over different areas in that region. No animal could stand against it, and none could be rescued from its power. It did as it pleased, and it became great. The Medo-Persian Empire did exactly that. They conquered a ton of area. They went in. They wound up taking over all of the Babylonian kingdom. All of that stuff falls. Now this is that next kingdom. That's what this ram represents. Isn't it fun to talk about stuff just like somebody's visual of something as God is sharing with them something that is going to happen? And we're now able to look at a lot of this and go, okay, yeah, we know this depicts this. We know in history this now, it depicts this. But then there's still those pieces that haven't yet happened. So we're going to keep going. Verse 5, it says this, as I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. And a lot of people have kind of questioned, what does this mean? This goat coming from the west, not touching the ground. It's this idea of Greece, the Greek Empire that came in, wiped out a bunch of places. It went really, really fast. Alexander the Great is likely this horn that's being seen here. It's all images of what is still to come. This is what's crazy. And sometimes, I know last week this was really heavy, and I could tell by your faces. Because some of you, your eyes were heavy last week. So I'm trying to talk with more gusto today or whatever. I don't know. So if I'm moving a little more than normal, that's why. I understand this is heavy, heavy stuff. And again, keeping in mind, this guy had no clue what he was even seeing. He doesn't understand it. We're going to find that out here a little bit later. But he sees this goat that's coming. Last week, as we talked about it, this would be represented by the leopard with 4 heads. If you remember that, the idea of the leopard, 4 heads and wings, it just came in so quick and it wiped out territory. Alexander the Great just wiped people out. And that's what we're seeing here, this great goat. It came toward the horned ram that I had seen standing beside the canal, and it charged it with great rage. I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its 2 horns. The ram was powerless and stood to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground, and it trampled on it. And none could rescue the ram from its power. This goat came in, Greece came in, and they wiped out the Medo-Persian Empire. The goat became great, very great. But at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place, 4 prominent horns grew up towards the 4 winds of heaven. This is the idea here, as we talked about a little bit, the 4 heads of the leopard that we read about last week. This is the idea that Alexander the Great, he dies young. He didn't have children to be successing him, to be the next king, so his 4 generals then take over the kingdom. That's this idea. That's the 4 horns. Isn't it amazing that God would show a man a vision so clear about stuff that is still to come, that so much so that this particular chapter, a lot of historians would say it's impossible that Daniel wrote this because it's too on point. But the reality is, they're right. It is impossible that Daniel wrote this. Without God writing it for him and showing him this, it would have been 100% impossible. But Daniel absolutely saw these things, and Daniel absolutely wrote them down. And they're for things to happen so far into the future. For me, it's mind-blowing to me to think that he showed him these things that were going to happen. And I'm so grateful that Daniel was wise enough to write it all down. So it goes on here in verse 9. It says, out of one of them came another horn, which started small but grew in power to the south, to the east, and toward the beautiful land, being Israel. So this horn, I wrote this dude's name down because I'm not as good at names as I used to be. This guy's name that most people would say this was Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes grew up out of one of those generals' kingdoms, and he became great himself. He became so great that he was taking over additional territory. He wound up going in to Jerusalem, to the temple. He wound up desecrating the temple. He took the temple to our God, and he set up an idol to the god Zeus. These are the Greeks. You know Greek mythology. You know about the Greek gods. He sets up an idol to Zeus in the temple. And then you know what he does? This is historic. This is just history. He offered a sacrifice in the temple of a pig, which would have been unclean to Jews. He desecrated the temple. He went in and he did all of this work, and then that's what he does. Power play. How often have we seen through Daniel, these guys are saying things like, well, whose God's going to save you now? Or how's your God going to help you now? They're just trying to power play God, and every time it turns out bad for them. I think of that today. How many people in our lives, or maybe it's you, maybe you're here today and you haven't made a relationship with Jesus. You don't know and love God yet. So maybe it is you. Maybe you're power playing God. You're out there trying to do what you want to do, and you're trying to think that somehow, some way, you can get God to do what you need him to do for you. That you can say the right things or do the right things, and all of a sudden God's going to bow down to you and give you what you want. That's not how it works. These folks are just power playing our God, the one true God. They just power play him, and it ends poorly. I think sometimes we see a lot of people doing that today. Okay, so this is going to be very unpopular. And I wasn't going to say this. So if you decide to stand up and leave, we will not judge you for that. But here's what I have to say. Is Dawn in the room? Because she's probably glaring at me. We oh boy. Jewish people, by Jewish descent, may very well be a part of the 12 tribes, and they may very well be a part of Israel, the nation of Israel. Jewish people who are Jewish because they live in Israel and don't claim Jesus to be their Messiah, this is going to be unpopular. We don't follow the same God. Because our God is 3 in 1. Our God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And if they don't see Jesus as Son, they don't see Jesus as part of the Godhead, we are not following the same God. Is that clear? Unpopular, no question. Politically, suicide. In this moment. But I'm telling you, we need to understand this. Because when we see things about Israel, the nation that we know today, is not Israel of the Old Testament. Israel of the Old Testament is the 12 tribes. That's where Israel is. I did some research this week. Do you realize that Israel, that we're supposed to, most people would think that we have this command from God to protect this country of Israel. Do you realize that our command from God is to protect God's chosen people? Do you realize 18% of the population of the nation of Israel today is Muslim? Are those God's chosen people? That piece is completely off base. Now, I'm not trying to be political. If you know me, I am as apolitical as I can be. Because I truly believe that Republicans and Democrats both need Jesus more than they need any political figure in their life. So I am apolitical. This is not a political statement. I just need you to know, as people who know and love Jesus, don't fall into the trap that we're serving the same God. Now, here's this. Your neighbor is probably not following the same God either. So does that make those who live in Israel that are Jewish by religion, waiting for the Messiah, does that make them any different than anyone else who knows or that needs to know Jesus? No, it doesn't at all. As a matter of fact, we should be working equally as hard to reach Jewish people of Jewish religion, that anybody who doesn't know and love Jesus, we should be working hard, striving for them to see and come to know Jesus. That's it. That's our whole mission. I said it last week, and it's the craziest thing that God would make us plan A to reach the whole world, to share Jesus with everybody, and he goes through us broken people. But it's so important. It's so important that we understand that those who are of any of those things, anybody who doesn't know and love Jesus, it's our responsibility to encourage them and point them in that direction. Now, I've said it before, you can't make them obey. God doesn't even say to do that. He says teach them to obey. So your job, teach them to obey. Don't make them, because you can't. And actually, if you try, guess what they're going to do? They're going to be like your kids. They're going to revolt against you, because that's what kids do. How we got there, I don't know. Antiochus, Epiphanes, he desecrated the temple. And I think that's what stirred this whole conversation. He does this to the temple. He sacrifices a pig on the altar. And then it goes on here as he's moving towards it. It goes on, verse 10. It grew into some until it reached the host of heaven. And it threw some of the starry hosts down to the earth and trampled on them. This was one of those pieces this week that was so confusing to me. Like, how is it possible that a person could reach into heaven and throw stars down to the ground and trample on them? I was like, what? God, what? What is this all about? I don't understand. I struggled with this one. It took me a long time to walk through this. And here's what I've come up with. There are a lot of different schools of thought on this. And again, I hope that you'll go home and I hope that you'll read it and I hope that you will spend time digging in. But here's what I think. It's just what I think. When we read that Antiochus Epiphanes was throwing stars down and trampling on them, do you remember the dream? Do you remember Joseph's dream? When the stars bowed down to him, and then his dad was like, what, we're going to bow down to you? I see the stars as God's chosen people. I think the stars are the Jewish people of that time. This is pre-Christ coming. Well, he showed up a few times. We've talked about that. But this is pre-Christ's death on the cross and resurrection. So these, I believe that the stars that are being talked about are Jewish people. Maybe some of the Jewish leaders. Like that Antiochus had just taken these people and trampled on them as he was running through the city. And he's doing all of these horrible things at the temple. He's doing all of that. He takes these stars. He throws them down. He tramples on it. Verse 11. It set itself up to be great as the commander of the army of the Lord. He's trying to become like a god. Have you guys ever heard of different types in the Bible? There's the idea that some people in the Bible, certain individuals in the Bible are types. This guy is an antichrist type. He's a type of antichrist. When you read about this, you read about what's happening here. Although it's already happened, it is pointing towards something that is still to come. Okay? That's why I told you this was a complicated chapter. And if I had to decide if I was going to teach Daniel again, I'd really question it a second time. This has been the toughest, most challenging scripture book I've ever tried to walk through. So here we go. We're going to keep going. So he's trying to set himself up to be like God in the sanctuary. So it keeps going. Because of the rebellion, the Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. When he did this to the temple, he desecrated it, the daily sacrifice ended. At that point, they weren't doing the sacrifices anymore. The temple they took it away. Verse 13, then I heard the Holy One, or a Holy One, speaking, and another Holy One said to him, how long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary, and the trampling of God's people. Which is another reason why I think he's talking about Jews. Jews of the 12 tribes. I got to clarify now that I brought that whole other thing up. Verse 14, he said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. And this is really interesting. Historically, again, there are multiple trains of thought on this. Historically, have you guys ever heard of the Maccabean revolt? The war, the Maccabean Wars? One of the interesting things that takes place in the Maccabean War is they come in, they retake the city, and they open up the temple. They go back in and they do that. Do you realize it was like exactly 2,300 mornings and evenings that took place? Like if you look at these things, this is why historians will say it's impossible that Daniel wrote this book. It's impossible for him to write it because it's so on point. These dates line up. All of these things line up. Now, there's a couple of other schools of thought. Again, I want you to go home. I want you to spend time. I want you to read about these things. Learn them. It's important. Verse 15, when I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Uli, which is that area there by the river, calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. Isn't that interesting? Do you think the one who looked like a man might have been Jesus? Might have been. Might have been. But then he's saying, yo, Gabriel. I almost feel like, man, I really wish I could have done that in my best Rocky voice. I know it's Adrian, but hey, it's close. So, Gabriel, go and tell this guy what this all means. Go on, go tell him, what does the vision mean? And this is what he says, starting in 17. Oh boy, I got to move. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and I fell prostrate. Boom, straight down on my face. Son of man, he said to me, understand that this vision concerns the end of time. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and I raised to my feet. Do you know what I hear out of this? This brother passed out. He was in a deep sleep, face first, on the ground as Gabriel's talking to him. That's really the reaction that most of the time we see when an angel shows up. Like, we think of these like angels playing harps and being all cute and fat like little babies. Cherubims, right? That's what they call those ones. That's not what I see. When the archangel Gabriel shows up, this dude, boom, drops in a deep sleep. Again, I think he passed out. That's just the way I read it. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just, I just don't think it's the right time to take a nap. When the angel Gabriel is having a conversation with you, like, I think I'm going to catch some Z's. So he keeps going. And it says this in verse 19, I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath. Because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. See, this is why a lot of people think that what we've seen happen but this is still yet potentially to come. Verse 20. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat, the king of Greece. We talked about that. And the large horn between his eyes is the first king. The four horns that replace the one that was broken off represent four kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper. Man, there's a lot of deceit today. Not that we're talking about this time right now, but there's a lot of deceit right now. And he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against them, against the Prince of Peace. So he's going to rise up, wants to be equal to God. He's going to take his stand against the Prince of Peace. This is the Prince of Princes. So this, again, double meaning. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human hands. So again, if we're talking about Epiphanes did not die in a battle. Epiphanes died of an illness. He did not die of human hands. So again, another piece that people think points to him. The vision of the evenings and the mornings that has been given you is true. So the idea of this 2,300 evenings and mornings, that's true, but seal that up, for it concerns the distant future. This one, I'm going to be honest with you, right up front, good luck. Show up Monday and tell me what you think that means. That's tomorrow night, by the way. We meet every Monday night to get together and dig deeper into these scriptures. It's a really great time. I love to hear your thoughts and insights. But this piece has got me a little bit shook. Because again, it makes me think this double meaning, this idea of this piece is still to come. But yet we can pinpoint a time where it looks like it's been fulfilled. So I will tell you that I don't believe that the Bible has any contradictions. So there's an explanation for this. And I'm confident we'll hear about it tomorrow night. And then it says this, Daniel, was worn out. I lay exhausted for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision and was beyond understanding. So can I just tell you, if you don't understand anything that was just read to you, anything that was just explained to you, I think work on that, but I think it's okay. Daniel didn't understand, and he had the archangel, Gabriel, sharing the explanation with him. He didn't understand. The other thing that I see here that really jumps off is he was exhausted. Have you ever been in a season where you were just feel like you were in a battle? And what he is seeing, guys, you got to think about this. He's watching utter devastation in this vision. He understands enough to know this is not, what I'm witnessing is not a good thing. It was exhausting for him. And if you've ever been in a battle, you know what it feels like to be exhausted. But let me encourage you real quick, because this is one of those things that stirred me a little bit this week. He was exhausted, and then he rested, which is important. Because I wonder how many of you could say you really fully understand how to rest in the Lord. Like, do you genuinely know how to rest? Like in the Ten Commandments, God has set aside a day for you. It's not, He set aside a day for you to rest. I'm horrible at it. I should be so much better. Like, I don't even know if I should confess that to you about how bad I am at doing this. I'm horrible at resting. But here's what I see. Daniel's exhausted by the fight. He's exhausted by seeing what he saw. And he rests. What a beautiful thing that he rested. But do you know what he does next? He gets up to do the king's business. And when I was reading this, it made me wonder, how many of us in the room today have been resting for a really long time, and it's time to get back to doing the king's business? His business. There is a season for rest. Absolutely. Absolutely a season for rest. But if we are indeed plan A for God's plan to reach the entire world, is it time for you to get back in the game? I remember growing up, I'm a child of I won't tell you how old I am, but let's just say I still genuinely believe that Michael Jordan is the GOAT. And do you realize there were times where Phil Jackson had the guts to put Michael Jordan on the bench? Do you know what happens when you're on the bench? You get to rest and you get new perspective. But you know what always happened? He always got back in the game. If you're on the bench and you're not resting and you're not gaining perspective, you better figure that out. Because God has work for you to do. It's work. Guys, I'm telling you, 2 Timothy tells us that if you want to live a godly life, persecution is an absolute reality in your life. If you are living life skating by without persecution, I got a couple of things to say. One, you're not living a godly life. Two, you might not know Him at all. You might not. Now, I know I'm speaking to the choir in this room. You guys are all living under persecution. You guys all know and love Jesus. I get that. But there are people in your life that don't. And if you're sitting on the bench, they may never, unless you get back in the game. All right? I feel like I went from teaching to preaching. I don't really like to do that. So I'm going to pray. And we're going to prepare to do communion today. Lord God, Father, I don't know where all that came from. Lord, I don't know. Maybe it's just something I needed to hear personally, that there's some things I'm resting and I need to get back in the game in certain areas of my life. Or Lord, maybe there was somebody else in the room that needed to hear that. I don't know, God, but this is for you to iron out whatever was said that was unpopular or didn't need to be heard or it really shouldn't even have been said. God, I pray that you just closed ears and they didn't hear the things they didn't need to hear. But God, today, whatever it is, I don't ever want to just bleed on people, God. I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about you and whatever it is you're trying to do in the lives of your people and the life of your church. God, allow yourself to be glorified. Allow yourself to be the King of Kings, the one who we always look toward, that we decide that we want to strive to be more like you. And Father, I pray that anything again that was said that shouldn't have been, that it just gets squashed. That's not remembered. But the things that penetrate the heart, the things that needed to be heard were heard. And God, whatever it is in all of this, it's got me so stirred these last few weeks. I pray that you help me navigate that and help me figure it out. We love you, God. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.